Thanks everyone for joining us for the last session of the first full day of SSP. We are very excited to be here and talk to you about standards creation and interoperability. My name is Nettie Legassi. I'm the Associate Director for Programs at NISO, National Information Standards Organization. We create and publish standards. We are not the only standards organization, but the standards that we'll be talking about today are NISO work. So I'm here today with my colleagues Heather Staines, Letty Conrad, Julie Zhu, and Jason Price, and they're going to be doing most of the talking today, and I will be running the mic and doing timekeeping. So I just want to do a quick introduction about NISO. We have been around for 75 years, actually 80 years, I think, this year. And we work in the information industry space, information and documentation. Our mission is to develop and maintain standards related to information documentation, discovery and distribution of published materials and media. And as that world is changing, we are changing along with it. And working very hard to support all of the various kinds of information that is developed and the way that people interoperate and share that information. We are a member organization, however, we are really driven by volunteers. And the people that are on the panel today are volunteers in different projects. And I'm hoping that you will also be intrigued enough to volunteer for our work one day. We are national is in our name, but we are actually quite international in scope. We have people who are participating from all over the world, which is really nice to work with colleagues in other places. What are some of the benefits of standards? Really, they facilitate commerce, innovation, and trade. They provide the platform that innovation can then be built upon. And once people in the industry agree on the basics, on how basic information can be shared, it's easier and cheaper then to build your own platforms on top of those shared pieces. And through that, they reduce costs and allow builders to anticipate what customers are going to require because everyone has agreed on the basics in advance. And of course, they support better communication and interoperability across systems, and you'll hear some of that today on the projects that we will be discussing. So that's it for me, and I'm going to hand the program over to Letty, who's speaking next.
Thank you, Nettie. Hi, everyone. I'm Letty Conrad, Publishing and Product Development Consultant. And while not currently part of a NISO member organization, I am always a big fan of NISO and a volunteer, of course, and lending my efforts today to kick things off. As a few of you have heard, we're going to try an interactive session. But before we do, I want to take a moment to just state the obvious. So bear with me a moment. Regardless of our day-to-day roles, and if you can, put those aside for the hour that we're together today, and think generally sort of higher level about the ways in which our work and all of our roles come together to form the supply chain that makes scholarly communications happen. We all need each other in various points of doing our job. We all rely on those pieces coming together and hopefully putting our instructors, researchers, scientists, readers at the center of what we're doing. Ours is a multi-directional value chain, meaning that we have those interchangeable moments where we rely on exchanges of data, information, protocols, lots of different points, touch points, throughout the scholarly communications life cycle. But ours can also be a somewhat delicate supply chain. So any gaps in those exchanges, who falls through that is the folks at the center, right? The readers, the folks who hit the dead links, the folks who can't get access to what they're looking for. So where our linkages break, that supply chain can be quite a fragile network network. So trust becomes a key portion of what we do in our network, in our supply chain, right? Having reliable terms of engagement. And this is really where NISO comes in a lot of respects. Those terms of engagement often define the kind of underlying or are defined by the underlying standards, information standards that really drive publication metadata and systems development, the protocols that power the communications sort of life cycle. So NISO coming in to really facilitate the governance of those standards and the work groups and the initiatives that drive the process of validating and ratifying standards help us build trust across that supply chain, right? So those work groups are essentially, as many of you know, made up of representatives throughout the supply chain, not always necessarily the readers, but certainly the folks who rely on those baton passing, those moments of critical data exchanges where that information standards are critical. And it's the inner working of these relationships, of this supply chain, and the underbellies of the work that we do together that will be the focus of our time together today. So enough of the fluffy stuff. Here's what we have planned. We have prepared, my colleagues in particular have prepared 3 skits. Each skit will begin with a quick introduction of the data standard or information standard, the initiative that is at hand. We'll take a look at the examples of ways in which each of the representatives of the supply chain is coming together to address that particular problem. We'll role play a little bit, working through those problems and talk about the lessons that we can learn from one another and what lessons we can learn that hopefully will increase our mindfulness about collaborating in the supply chain. And then we'll leave time, of course, for discussions and questions. So our first skit is actually going to be sort of a demonstration so we can get a feel for how this will work. The first one that we're going to start with, we're going to use project transfer as our focus. Show of hands, how many folks are familiar with project transfer? Brilliant. The code, as you know, provides voluntary guidelines for publishers to follow when transferring journal titles from one publisher to another. This way, parties can ensure that the journal content remains easily accessible by librarians and by the readers that they serve. It was originally proposed in 2006 by UKSG, first released in 2007, and transfer moved at that time, to NISO in 2015. The latest version was fall of last year. And I think I will hand it over to our expert at this point.
Yeah, so if you have a card that says transfer at the top, if you could join us here in the front. And again, we're going to run through this as an example, so we're not going to take time afterwards to discuss transfer, but in the question time at the end, if you have questions, we're happy to take those. So Nettie, can I get the microphone? Yeah. Okay. So we've got our 4 victims here. So first we will hear from the person who's playing, and just because they're up here playing like librarian doesn't necessarily mean they are. Oh, we have 2 mics. So who is playing the librarian? You can give your first name if you like. So you can, Becky, if you can read the card.
More publishers should sign on to transfer. Journals keep changing publishers, and it's very easy for a title to fall between the cracks.
Excellent. Our second speaker is playing a publisher not yet signed on to transfer code.
We are not opposed to transfer in principle, but we are small and don't have the resources to do everything that the code requires.
So this is performance. Yes. So exciting. Now we have the publisher who's the receiving publisher. So if you're familiar with transfer, this is the publisher that has won the bid and is going to be now working with the journal.
We don't always get the information that we need.
I thought that should have been longer, shouldn't it? I hope you don't feel ripped off. And finally, the transferring publisher, so the publisher that is sadly seeing the journal go out the door.
But we're always the transferring publisher. Journals don't transfer to us. Why should why should we invest the time and money and energy to benefit ultimately somebody else?
Great performances. So you may return to your seats. So that's how it will go for the sessions for the other standard, and then that will be followed by, somebody advance the slide. The person who volunteers on the committee, I guess I should come back up there, but I'm down here now to get the microphone away. So I have been volunteering with Project Transfer for quite a while now, probably 9 years that I heard about Transfer. I was working at Springer, and I got put on the team that took care of the bids, the society publisher bids that came in. That's okay. Thank you. You're so good, sir. Thank you. And it immediately became apparent to me how useful Transfer would be from many, many different perspectives. So when I was able to, frankly, when I left Springer and I had more freedom with my life, I was able to volunteer for the Transfer project. So I've been involved ever since. And it's really useful to become involved with the standard because you can really see the inner workings, the kind of conversations that happen. We can assure you these standards do not change just because we want to just screw up everybody's day and have people do things different. There are good reasons and requests, and we do try to keep up with things for the time. So I have found it tremendously valuable to have insight into standards and particularly into transfer. And I say, because this is an example, we're not going to do discussion on this. We will with the next two, but at the end, if there's time, we're happy to take questions on transfer. So this is an example of how each one's going to work. So.
Great. Excellent. Okay, trial run. And this is our first attempt at this. We will perfect as we move along. Okay, so skit number 2. Show of hands. Open Discovery Initiative. Who's aware? All right. So as you know, the ODI is focused on those pre-indexed web scale library discovery services, right? The Google for your holdings in the library. A technical recommendation, essentially, for the data exchanges. So this is a really key one where those baton passes can really create some problems, right? The data exchanges across libraries, publishers, and discovery service providers. But the recommended practice is also providing a way for libraries to assess content providers' participation in discovery services. And ODI offers a model by which content providers work with discovery vendors in a fair, unbiased approach to indexing and linking. The ODI sheds light on the sometimes black box of discovery services. It helps avoid bias. It helps educate publishers what happens when you send that metadata out. It helps libraries understand what publishers are doing to index in those discovery services. It helps to level the playing field so we're all aware of those challenges and the ways in which we really need one another. It helps to ensure that each stakeholder is, as I said, on the same playing field, but equally aware of both the benefits and the challenges. So for content providers, it helps us understand what is being indexed, how is it found. For discovery service providers, helping to understand, where the gaps are for users, what's the value of the service. For libraries, to understand what's available in discovery and linking. And our expert is going to kick us off with our next script, or skit, excuse me.
Okay. I'm Julie Zhu, IEEE's Discovery Service Relations Manager. In the relative early stages of web-scale discovery service tools, and people had a lot of questions, such as why do these tools not include everything that we libraries subscribe to? And should content providers give all the content to the discovery tools for indexing? If not, why? So now let's listen to one librarian, two publishers, and one discovery service provider. Let's listen to what they said in the early days.
Would you guys rather they come up in front or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't
Come
you
up.
all of you with ODI come up to the front?
Okay.
When they
So,
had to come up, you guys should have to come up.
yeah.
I'm so glad you're playing. Good for you.
So,
I'm playing because I'm Marion, the librarian. Honestly, the first half of my career, I was a library director. So there you go. All right. All content providers, primary publishers, ANI aggregators, should allow their content to be indexed by all the discovery service tools because we pay a lot for content and for discovery tools. And we purchased a new collection, but it cannot be found in our discovery tool. We have ANI databases from one major provider, but they cannot be found in our discovery tool from its competitor.
We want to deliver all content to discovery service providers and be ODI conformant, but we don't have the resources to do so because we're a small society publisher. We can't appoint someone to focus on this. We have so many content types, it's difficult to have the discovery vendors index them all. And we're delivering content to discovery vendors, but we're not ready to declare conformance.
So I am also an ANI provider or an aggregator, and we hesitate to send our content to discovery service providers for three reasons. One, putting our content in discovery tools will hurt revenue of our ANI or aggregating products. Two, we invest a lot in enriching our metadata and cannot give it to discovery tools for free because they just want it for free. Three, there is no guarantee that discovery tool search results will link back to our products. In fact, I'm pretty sure they won't.
Okay, so I'm a discovery service provider. And we agree to all of the ODI principles and are ready to declare conformance. For all the work, indexing, ranking, linking, reporting, it's all very complex. Because we index content from thousands of sources, we don't have resources to index everything in a timely and accurate way or adjust to each party's needs. And we store data in multiple places, and it's difficult to create accurate coverage and usage reports.
Okay, thank you. So these, just stay and can you stay because we need round two. Yeah, stay round two. Yeah, yeah, so sure. So what we heard, these are all very legitimate concerns from the various parties. So in ODI, we listen to all the parties and try to deal with quite a few issues. During the first phase of ODI working group, the members were organized into six subgroups. We worked on six major items. Okay, for instance, what content elements should content providers send to discovery service providers to index? And should ODI recommend a kind of like a small list of element basic core elements such as title, author, publisher name, etc. Or should we recommend a longer list of elements including an abstract and full text? And what should the data format be, and how should the data be transferred? Is it possible to require one single type of data format, such as MARC or ONYX, or should multiple data formats be allowed? So, and say another question is, should there be reports on what content is included in a discovery tool, and how detailed should the reports be on the collection level, on the title level? So, after many months of discussions and tugs of war, the group reached consensus on some items and decided to delay recommendations for some other ones. For instance, ODI recommended a list of core elements and at the meantime encouraged the content providers to send more content elements such as abstract and full text to discovery service providers for indexing. For, let's say, discovery coverage reports, it was decided that these reports are just too complicated. And since there were still a lot of content gaps in various tools, it was not time yet time yet to demand discovery service vendors to provide detailed reports, and these reports could wait till phase 2. So some compromises. And in 2014, ODI published the first set of recommendations. In 2015, ODI Standing Committee published conformance checklist templates for both content providers and discovery service providers. So far, 3 discovery service providers like EBSCO, ProQuest, Nix Libris, they have published their conformance statements. At least 9 publishers have published their content provider conformance statements. The ODI recommendations have also led to more changes. At least 8 publishers have created positions focusing on content discovery. So they realize it's not easy. It's just like the discovery problems are very complex, and it needs to they need to work with various vendors, working internal teams with libraries to focus on different parts of the ecosystem. So at least 8 content publishers have created positions for content discovery. At the meantime, the discovery service providers throughout the years have become more collaborative. And as far as we know, some of them are holding regular meetings with dozens of publishers to talk about indexing, linking, and authentication issues. And of course, not all the problems are solved. And let's listen to the second round of tugs of war, what the librarian, the publishers, and the discovery service vendor are still talking about.
Is this the only round they have to stay for? Or is there another one?
No, that's a second, just two.
Some of our subscribed content is still missing in our discovery tool, and we don't know how to identify missing content. Content providers and discovery service providers should do more. For example, we have one electronic resources librarian, and we need tools to help us identify content gaps. We need better usage reports to prove ROIs. We want sources of records and open access content clearly labeled.
Primary publisher 1. We've done all we can, but some content is still not accessible by all customers in all discovery tools. Libraries and DSPs should do more. For example, DSPs are not indexing our content in a timely way. We need reports to see gaps in usage. Many libraries do not configure DS and KB correctly. They should take more responsibility. We want fair linking to our platform where the customers can access full text.
So again, on the aggregator, we're still not very sure that ODI takes our needs seriously. We're still not sure if joining up with these guys, the DSPs, is a good business option. So for example, if we give metadata records to a DSP, we want clear branding and good ranking for our records. We want fair linking to our AI product, even though customers may not have quick access to full text.
I'm still the discovery service provider. We want to do more for content providers and libraries, but the work is complex and we don't have enough resources. For example, we're not charging a lot for our discovery products. We're already doing more to collaborate with publishers and support libraries, but our data systems are old and may not produce the desired reports easily. Woe is us.
Thank you.
Wonderful acting.
Thank you. So, ODI members, listen to what all the stakeholders are saying, and we also discuss among ourselves. So, for currently, we're in the second phase of ODI. We're working on 8 items. We subdivide into 8 subgroups, and some of these are new. items. Some of these items are new, such as how to handle open access content and how to recommend library best practices in configuring discovery service tools and knowledge-based tools. Some are not new, such as how to create content coverage reports and how to create better discovery usage reports. So ODI is designing surveys to libraries, publishers, and discovery service vendors on all these items, and the surveys will be sent out pretty soon. So, right, so Nelly is working on them, and when we send them out, we hope to hear from you. Okay. So we learn a lot during the process of creating standards. We've learned that it is good to tell the other parties what we want, what we need, what we demand. But it is also important to try to learn and understand how the other sides work. So what is feasible and what may be too difficult or too early to ask. And we need people of all kinds of various kinds of expertise to join us. For instance, when we work on creating recommendations for better usage reports, and we would like to have the people who work on these reports for the discovery providers to join us, at least on some of the meetings. It will give us really good insights how they actually do the work. Um, so the whole process could be frustrating, and it's also interesting, and it goes on. It goes on and on. It seems never end. Hope you're joining us to make the whole process a little bit better. Thanks. So I'm going to pass to this third one.
Yeah, good job, Lily. I'm so impressed with the acting out there. You guys are just fabulous. Okay, last skit. Let's talk about KBART. Who knows what KBART stands for? Awesome. Love you people. Fabulous. Okay, standards essentially for fulfillment and library holdings data. Used primarily in link resolver services, right? KBART automation is essentially an extension of that basic standard. Begun in early 2017, I want to say. The goal essentially is to create a recommended practice to support individual library holdings of, sorry, I should have advanced that. Individual library holdings of electronic products and library holdings request and retrieval, right? So both for the correct link, but actually getting to the right place. The initial draft of the recommended practice was shared publicly at the end of last year. It had an open public review period, which is now over, and the working group accepted the feedback and comments, and our expert is going to lead us through our last skit.
All right, just a little bit of an introduction. I do feel like I have reached standards nirvana with this KBART automation thing. And the reason is, this is my third NISO group. The other two I served on for at least a couple years, the first one quite a bit longer than that. And it was a transcendent experience to join this automation group, because I felt like I saw the wheels of motion of NISO standards and best practice productivity happening around me. And it's such a very focused project and with a number of really experienced people who know how to work on a NISO group and get things done. And it really has been pretty exciting to do it. So this, though, for you all is actually going to be double jeopardy of some sorts, because in addition to bringing the folks up who are going to do the skit, I'm going to ask you for your interpretations of what the friction points are and what some solutions might be. So we'll see if that works. We're gonna try it. But before I do that, I want to do a quick diagram thing here, just to really put into a nutshell what KBART automation is trying to do. So up here on the upper left, the users are coming in, they're getting linking, they're going to find the stuff that they have access to and not any of the stuff that they don't have access to as long as the knowledge base is correct, right? And so what KBART does is it allows the feeding of the knowledge base with hopefully accurate data. Well, so our content providers are sending these global lists into the knowledge base, but just like publishers and libraries and consortia, they're all snowflakes, right? They have their collections are different. So there was originally this effort to send these local holdings lists into the institution, and then they send that into the knowledge base. And this doesn't work very well. So the idea is to get rid of this section and to basically allow the content providers to send library-specific, and that's the key thing that Letty mentioned, library-specific information into the knowledge base and then back to the user so that we have locally accurate data working. Simple, right? Well, we'll see. Okay, so my round one folks, if you'd come up. I do. So that means you only have to stand up here one round, then you can sit down. So there's that advantage. Although some will come back for the second round. So yeah, it's going to go e-resource librarian, big commercial publisher, then knowledge-based provider, then big commercial publisher 2. That's the order, okay? So, and there'll be a little bit of interactivity too. So e-resource librarian, make your statement, and I will follow up as your narrator.
My knowledge.
Is it working? I think it's working.
Okay. My knowledge base is wrong and this spreadsheet is inaccurate.
Well, what's wrong with it?
Where do I start? It doesn't include last year's transfer titles. It includes all the backfile years we don't have access to. And it doesn't include our subscribed titles.
Yeah, big fail. Okay, but big commercial number one, publisher number one, do you have a solution?
Yeah, you've got 100% accurate, spreadsheet-free, super and automagical solution that solves all these problems.
Really? How does it work?
Actually, you've got on-demand KBART formatted data that reflects your actual titles and access dates. You can forget about all that tracking one-size-fits-none standard packages. Try it out, test it, see how amazing it is. Just connect your knowledge base to our API and we solve all your problems.
Excellent. Knowledge-based provider, how about that connection?
We haven't implemented that solution.
Why not?
Only one publisher has implemented it. Will others do it? Will they do it the same way? Plus, we don't think libraries will adopt it. We'd have to change our system, and it would disrupt our workflow and our value add. And it doesn't support our package-level approach.
Oh, that's a shame. Big personal publisher number 2, what do you think?
I think we're willing to try automation too.
Excellent. Yeah, where I lost my spot. Sorry. How come?
Well, we realized that spreadsheets of holdings is just not viable, and it's a top frustration for our customers. And we've seen it as a really critical solution for books. So we're starting to offer more bespoke journal collections, and we need to support our business model. But we found 2 knowledge-based providers willing to support it.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you, round one, folks. You may sit. So, here we go. What do you think? What were some points of friction? Nobody wants to be the first adopter. Absolutely. That's a common one for NISO, right? For any standard. Others? Yes.
Conflict between publisher 1 and publisher 2. That isn't usually a source of friction that we see.
Sorry, I missed that. Start again.
Conflict between big publisher 1 and big publisher 2. This isn't something we usually see.
Got it. So one publisher had one opinion and one had another, and usually they kind of tend to fall in together and move in the same direction and maybe toe the line. I could see that. Yes. Others?
We are missing a role here who manage expectations of people here. So
Ah, yes. How do we manage expectations? So this is a point of friction. What are we trying to do here? And do we all agree on what that is? And how do we get there? That's one of those things that every NISO group is trying to figure out and has to navigate in order to make progress. Yeah, excellent. So solutions, what was the solution that was presented here? It was by that last publisher. Did you miss it? Willing to try it, exactly. So I found found two people out there in my partnership land that are willing to try it with me, and we're just going to go try it because otherwise we're not going to get anywhere. And when I realized that was happening within our group, I was like, oh, this could work. Yes. Okay. So, got to identify those challenges. Test or market a solution if one presents itself, and that's what you're going to hear about in round 2. And being able to test while proposing the solution. So our automation group was working on this whole thing, and the testing was kind of happening at the same time. And that synergy is also something that's exciting when that can happen. Okay, round 2, folks, please. Excellent. So we're going to market the solution first as a knowledge base provider. What do you have to say?
Well, our publisher and library customers have been asking for it, so we have a beta solution.
Great. How's it going?
We don't know. We're waiting to hear back from publisher number 2. Also, we're concerned that it might reflect changes that haven't been updated in our publisher number 2 all titles list, so it might break.
Oh, hope not. Okay, big commercial number 2. How's it going with the automation beta?
Well, we got a few libraries to adopt it, and it's working, but they're not happy. They turned it back off. I've got to go back to the libraries and better understand this issue, but it looks like a case of unintended consequences.
I wonder what those might be. E-resource librarian, what happened?
Wah wah. It broke my title history.
Tell me more.
The data in the automated list shows only the current title and original start date and ignores all the past title changes, so my A to Z list and MARC record service are corrupted. I had to turn it off.
Oh, boo. Big commercial number 2, what's publisher number 2, what's your response?
Well, yeah, title history is a known issue.
Is it a deal breaker?
Yes, for some libraries, but we don't know how many. The KBART best practice addresses title history, but for many publishers, the cost of following the practice kind of outweighs the benefit.
What can be done?
Well, we need to figure out whether their issues actually affect access or just the presentation of the data.
Great, thank you. Okay, you all can sit down. Thanks so much. Okay, so what did you see happening here? What went wrong? Somebody said it earlier. Well, what's one of the things that went wrong? Say again? Couldn't get full representation. Say more. Right. So it didn't work perfectly for what the e-resource librarian wanted, did it?
It was non issue. So
But the publisher knew about it, and it was a known issue. That's right. And that known issue came from where? It came from KBART, which I started on in, I don't know, a decade ago. And that known problem that we had in KBART of that title history thing, it re-emerged, right? Okay. Any thoughts on next steps toward a solution? This is tricky. But this is what it's like to be in these groups. Oh no, it broke. In fact, this is where we are right now from my perspective. Like the group's doing something and I don't know what's going on exactly, but because this is reality, this has just happened, We have to figure out how to take the next step. Thoughts? All right. Sorry.
Oh, look, Alice has got it.
Yeah.
Try and get more people to test it and give you feedback.
More people to test it? Yep. Alex, did you have a thought?
Stakeholders to work together to identify a solution.
Get the stakeholders to work together, right? So here, the question we have is that e-resource librarian perspective? And it's come from a couple. Is that really crucial, or is it a red herring? Because it may be that they're wanting to use this tool to maintain accurate, specific title history lists when the goal of the group, if the group agrees, is to actually support access to the content. And so if the linking tools still work despite the lack of title history, then we can come back and say, well, yes, we'd like to address that, but look, here's a group of libraries that doesn't care about title history. They did this and it fixed everything, right? So we don't know if that's the case, but that's kind of our next step, is to try and test it and figure it out. So there are tugs of war everywhere. We can go into others actually that were experienced as part of doing this. We went through 3, I can name them, and they're ones that we went through before, and they come back up again, and you realize, oh, we're in a tug of war again here. What's the best way to get to the next step? So I find it just fun and fascinating to be working on these groups. Sometimes it happens really slow. This group worked really fast, which also helped. We met every 2 weeks. We were making a lot of progress. Sometimes it takes more time. But so group agreement on the goal is crucial. And everything else is phase 2. So there were a lot of, right? That sounds familiar to any other NISO folks, right? Oh, we're not going to test that now. We got to put that in backlog. And that's crucial. You have to agree on something that can actually be accomplished and take those things that can't and put them off until later, because you have to keep that momentum of making progress in order to get to the next step. So, and another one, and this is sort of a broader one, but focusing on adoption or even adoptability. I think of electability, which has its own issues, right? But if your solution is not going to be adoptable by the people out there that you want to do things that you need, that are going to use your solution, then it's no solution at all. And so we're thinking through all that at the same time as working on these things. So, any other thoughts on this one? Questions? All right, so we have some more time. What should we do with that time before we do conclusions? So thoughts about the skits in general and about NISO and questions. What thoughts or questions do you have? That's it.
Maybe an observation, and I'm not really a discovery service provider. I'm Chris Shillam from Elsevier. And I was, I think, on the topic committee, the NISO topic committee that approved ODI, and maybe K-Parte as well. I think one lesson I'd invite people to think about is making sure that all of the stakeholder groups involved in developing a standard have motivations to participate. I think particularly with ODI, maybe it's not clear what's in it for every one of the stakeholder groups, and that's one of the things that really makes it difficult to drive these things and get them adopted.
Right, that's the famous with them, right? What's in it for me, and that importance of recognizing that if stakeholders are going to engage, there needs to be something that they can gain as well in order to have that perfect state of situation that you can make progress, right?
Yeah, this is something in the second phase we're really trying to address. I'm not sure whether it will be successful, but
hopefully the
surveys
will elicit
that
we'll
kind
of input.
I'm curious, how many folks in the room have worked on a NISO work group or topic committee initiative? Show of hands. Anybody have some success stories?
Or other standards, not just NISO.
Other war stories.
Yeah, eMetrics was, I think, maybe 10 years. Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry, Letty, go ahead.
Oh, I was just trying to get the folks in the audience to share their own lessons about what works, or Bill and Margie too on a question.
Well, one thing I'm observing recently, pardon me?
Introduce yourself.
Oh, Bill Kastorf, is that historically standards as they're developed would get more and more complex because people would say it has to address this, and oh, it also has to address this. Now, yep, it also has to address this. And the trend I'm seeing now is just the opposite of simplifying the standard.
Mm-hmm.
Go for the essence, go for the minimum viable product approach, and then let people profile it and add as they need it for different use cases, but don't burden the standard with trying to do everything for everybody. Just give them a framework that works for everybody.
Is that working better, do you think?
It is.
Any examples?
Well, most of my standards work today is in the W3C.
Yeah.
But one example from IDPF land before they became part of W3C was as EPUB 3 was being developed, we realized that we wanted to make sure it was useful for educational content. So we're adding all kinds of vocabulary and features that were needed for educational publishing. And the standard was getting complex, and a lot of that is not needed for anybody but educational publishers. So instead, we developed the EduPub profile of it. And that's actually, when it all became part of the W3C, much of the current work on EduPub is actually handed off to an entirely different standards organization, which is IMS Global, because they do educational system interoperability. They're the ones that need to do that, right?
They're the ones that are going to benefit.
Not
right?
the W3C, but it'll be a profile. And so the same thing is happening now as we're working on web publications, that in almost every meeting, and we have weekly meetings in these working groups, the most common activity and effect in any weekly meeting is, do we really need that? Can we take that thing out of the spec rather than I need to add this thing and this thing and this thing? So yeah, I'm seeing this actually happening now. Web publishing is in process, but interestingly, the first profile that we're doing for the developing web publishing spec is for audiobooks. And it's because there is no standard for audiobooks, and it's the Wild West, it's a mess out there, right? So it's like, okay, but the things that we're doing for audiobooks all conform to this basic framework of web publications, but they're not going to be useful to a comics publisher, which will be another profile of a web publication. So the web publication format needs to be very light, basic, fundamental framework.
Fascinating. Thank you.
So I'm Howard Radner. I'm the executive director of Chorus, sort of an aggregator, but not really. But I have to agree with what Bill was saying, and I'm going to reflect on the creation of the DOI. So when we started the DOI, so many years ago, and it eventually became an ISO standard, I think, and then an ISO standard. But it didn't start as a standard. That's not how we started it. It was really a bunch of publishers that had a problem to solve, and they all wanted to solve the problem. They wanted to link to each other. They didn't know how to do this at scale. And they really created, we didn't call it an MVP at the time because we didn't know from an MVP, but we created something very simple that all of us could agree on. And it had its flaws, certainly did. And Chris and I had many wars over those flaws. But the point was, you wanted to get it out, and you wanted to get it working to discover those flaws. But you wanted to get something working. And one of the problems that I have with a lot of the NISO things is things are sometimes put on paper, and they're never put in practice. You will never discover where the problems are. Like imagine building a car in concept. Until you actually put it on the road, you don't understand that you have to have air in all the tires and they have to be balanced and blah, blah, blah. You need to get things operating on a small scale and then add the bells and the whistles later, right? So the MVP concept, which is an agile concept, is a really important one. And I think it's really important for the standards to understand and all the stakeholders to understand that you're not going to get everything on day one. Because I even remember when we were talking about ORCID, it was the same thing. We had lots of different stakeholders, especially with publishers and institutions, all wanting all sorts of things. I remember the very first meeting, even before it was called ORCID, people wanted an institutional identifier. right? Those days was before we even had an ORCID concept. We had to say no. That was tough. Some people didn't come back because they didn't get it, but that was actually okay because things moved forward.
Yeah, I think, yeah, like for the ODI, when we put out the first recommendations, we were hoping more publishers would declare conformance, but we did not get as many to conform. But the good thing is that more and more realize that the work needs to be done, and that decided to dedicate more resources to the work. So that start a whole new process. I think that's a very positive sign. So I think yeah. So there's no way for the any standards to be too demanding, to be too complicated. If it's very complicated, people will fear to declare conformance. But as long as it will propel them to start thinking, start working, I think we're in the right direction.
Hi, Margie Lava. I guess I have to echo what Howard was saying about the derivation of the DOI. We went through many iterations, but two of them of note. One of them is that the NISO standard for the DOI is the syntax only. And the reason that it was only the syntax is because the battles were bloody, and they were very much the positions of your example of the ODI. The same stakeholders, and we finally got together a bunch of people from NFACE actually. There were 6 of us, and we put together what we called the contributed metadata set. So we did not use the full Dublin core because it would completely skewer the ANI provider's business model, and that was a legitimate fear, and it's still a legitimate fear. And if you can't get around that, it's never going to succeed. So I think there's much to be learned from the compromises that we found, and that information is all in the bowels of the NISO archives somewhere. Or it's in my file cabinets. I can share it with you. And the other thing that I wanted to say is I wanted to applaud the organizers of this session. I thoroughly enjoyed the skits. Thank you very much.
Good job. And thank you for participating, everybody. Thank you. We were nervous, so thank you.
I think there were still 2 comments outstanding, one over here and one over here.
Hi, Anita Bandrowski, RID Initiative. I would like to, applaud some of the questions at the end, and of course the organizers. But this concept of use it and then figure out what's wrong with your MVP-like thing is how we started running the RID initiative. We knew we were very, very, very far from perfect, but we needed to get started. And in order to get started, you kind of just have to go out there and say, okay, here's my thing. It's ugly, but you can use it. So, that was a very nice thing. And we actually just became part of the JATS 1.2. So, we've now contributed that to the accepted journal article tagging suite standard. So, we're really excited about that. It's less ugly, but still kind of ugly. But it's fine.
It's a work in progress. I mean, I think
It
that's
is.
a great example of keeping it lean and focused on a very specific problem to be solved that eventually can be stitched together with other standards. So they're working together. And that was actually one of the sort of motivations or inspirations for this panel was, NISO has so much incredibly good work going on, and we don't always expose how it's getting done, but also how all those standards are interconnected, right? So yeah, great example.
This is just an open question because I was trying to understand that we now have a DOI, but if you look at the ecosystem of publishing, there is thesis, there are articles, and there are micro articles emerging. You can deposit your data, you can deposit. So do you have like any standards evolving for macro DOI, micro DOI, connecting all these? Is anybody working on this here?
Nettie, you might know more than
I think I see someone reaching for the mic.
Oh.
Mike?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Kemp from Crosscraft. So,
I'll start crowd.
thought I'd sneak in at the end. So it depends a little bit on exactly what you're talking about, but if you want to connect pieces of content together, you can do that in the metadata for your DOIs at Crossref. Yeah, that's the short answer. You can catch up later if you want more detail. Sure.
So is that like a nesting? This is brand new to me. Is that right? So you can say these are sub-objects of this upper DOI?
Yeah, there's a couple ways to
In the
do it.
syntax?
There are what we call components. So if you have figures and things like that, you can register those and link them to their, journal articles or whatever. And then there's something called relations in the metadata. So you can say like version of or things like that.
Cool.
Fabulous. Within the JATS metadata, right? Okay. We should probably, one more, Suzanne?
Hi, Susanna Kemperman with OCLC. So first of all, thanks to the organizers. This was really fun. Great session on something that's often dry. I think it's really... Yes! Who needs a bar after this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I just want to point out, because I've worked both in the library and the publishing world, and I'm often kind of a bridge builder between both, that for any standards that you're developing, it's really important from the get-go to get all the stakeholders in the information workflow and the communication chain involved, because otherwise you just have these competing interests that don't help anybody, be that in terms of authentication or KBART or whatever it is. So anytime we, from the get-go, get all the stakeholders involved, we will have better results. So thank you guys for bringing these different perspectives together.
Ending us on a kumbaya note.
That's
I love
right.
it.